Hey, it's Alicia, and you're checking out a very special Indie 1023 session at home. I got the legendary Jon King, co-founder and vocalist of the beloved post-punk band, The Icons, Gang of Four. He's right here. Looking back at the band's history, they're originally from Leeds, England, emerged stateside here in the US after the release of their debut album, Entertainment, in 1979. And their impact on music has been incredible. They've influenced bands like R.E.M. and Nirvana. You've heard their music woven into pop culture over the years, from film to video games, and they've been sampled by incredible artists, like on the latest Run the Jewels album. Here to talk about their gigantic new box set and his celebrated career from his home in London, welcome to Jon King.
Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for joining me. It is a true honor. We love you here in Denver, here in the States, and at Indie 1023, my radio station.
Well, it's a pleasure to be here.
Great, and I'm so happy that you're doing press right now. Matador Records has released this massive Gang of Four box set. And do you have it near you?
I do. I brought it up as a prop. It's a bit heavy, but here it is. It's a 3.5 kilo thing. You may have seen the unboxing of it, but I designed it to sort of have little kind of gags in it, like the reveal of the Entertainment album cover, and it's all color coded, and there's 4 albums. Well, there's actually 5 albums. One's a double live album of the American Indian Center.
That's something new, right?
Yeah. In here, obviously the original Entertainment thing, remastered from the 1/4-inch tape that's been in storage at Abbey Road, which is just down the road from here. Oh. Then there's a Solid Gold, which was recorded in the studio. The Beatles recorded all of their albums in, and on the desk, the Dark Side of the Moon was made, and that was actually at Abbey Road, down the road. This double album has been doing the rounds for years as a bootleg. When we played in 1980, because the whole collection is in the years between 77 and 81. This was our first US tour, and we ended up at the American Indian Center in San Francisco, and the show was broadcast across the Bay Area, and the engineer on the show took an illicit recording of the tape. An illicit, I don't know. And it's great that he did so. So when we were putting this together, we wanted to do something that was what we sounded like in 1980. So that's that. And the cover is my version of the Four Winds flag of the Native American movement. Oh. And so that was great.
I love that. This kind of has your greatest work in there, the era of you guys from 1977 through 81, like it's plastered all over the box set. This is you on vocals, Andy Gill on guitar, Dave Allen on bass, Hugo Burnham on drums. And 2021 marks the 40th anniversary of the end of that era. It also sadly marks the 1-year passing of your friend and bandmate, Andy. For us fans, this box set is just everything, because it does come with so much. It has the book in there and all that vinyl. There's a cassette tape and some little buttons. Talk to me, how long of an undertaking was this for you?
Well, it's been quite a long process. Actually, I think it must have been 3.5 years ago. A friend of a friend, I've got a lot of American friends, a friend was in Los Angeles, said to me, one of my friends is an American attorney. Mm-hmm. And he tells me that there's this law in America called the 35-year rule, which says you can't, in the entertainment industry, have a contract that lasts in perpetuity. I mean, it is a surprising thing to everyone to know that record contracts routinely are forever and ever. I mean, the United States, has the most enlightened approach to that in the world, because back in the 80s, they passed a law that said, unless you wanted to be in a contract forever and ever in the record industry, you had the right to challenge it, so long as you did so before the 38th year of the first 40 years of it. Mm-hmm. So he got in touch with us. He said, I don't want any money because I just love the band, and all you've got to do is fill in the form. And so we did that in whatever it was 2.5 years ago. to comply, because then the record label we had then, which was Warner Brothers, had the right to a sunset clause. They had the right to challenge it or to come back with better terms. Of course, when we signed these things in the olden days, all product was physical. And so the royalty that we got was okay for a physical album. But when you move into a world where 95% of your sales are digital, there is no distribution, breakage, manufacturing, archiving, warehousing. There's none of that at all. So we then were able to get out of the deal, and I started work on the box set. I think it must have been in the fall of 2019. Mm-hmm. And I was in London. I was flitting between London and Copenhagen. I had a flat in Copenhagen, and I used to go there a lot. And someone that I worked with who was really smart was a guy called Bjakubin Norman, and Bjarke is a fantastic industrial designer. And of course, everyone knows if you're good in Denmark industrial design, you are the best in the world.
Right.
And so I wanted it to be really interesting and not like other box sets. You know, look box sets, they look really generic, don't they? In shiny paper,
yeah,
shiny colored pictures and shiny PRE kind of stuff. And so I wanted it to have the flavor of what we emotionally and intellectually felt life was like back in the time that we made the record. So I didn't want it to be about now. I wanted it to be about what we felt like then.
Yeah.
And so that was the sort of thought. And also I wanted it to be recyclable. Mm-hmm. So I wanted cardboard, so you could just throw it in the trash ultimately. And so that led to a number of design ideas. And then we came up with the 2 tray idea that fitted in this. So the second tray had the idea was to create a book. So then there was the cassette was a kind of gag, but mm-hmm. Hugo had collected loads and loads of stuff very brilliantly over the years. And these are the demos of the songs that were on Solid Gold and some mm-hmm. from Entertainment. So I didn't even know these things existed. And we initially wanted to make a C120, which is, mm-hmm. means a 2-hour-long cassette. There's no one in the world that makes them anymore with that thin tape. So it's a C90.
C90, okay.
It's a C90. And so that's a good gag. But it's got really interesting content on it. Then some of the songs have got very funny titles, again, which I'd forgotten. The working title for one of the songs was Asshole, and which I don't know which one it turned into, but it's probably Damaged Goods or something. And then there was the book. So I then, having done this thing, it was a white page, American A4 book, and then trying to populate it with stuff. And so we went out to everybody who might want to contribute. Mm-hmm. And what I was amazed by was Hugo was very responsible for this side of things. He's reached out to everybody, and everyone from Sophia Coppola to Michael Stipe to Henry Rollins to whatever, Vanessa from Pylon and the girls from whatever it was, Bush Tetras. It was fantastic, to get their contributions. And the other thing that I wanted to be was like a scrapbook. So there's these sort of trompe l'oeil effects. These are Andy's guitar picks. The button inside it is I photographed the volume pot on his guitar. It's just so sweet. And here is, in fact, the photograph at the back. That's Andy's guitar, whose name was Greta. She was called Greta. This Fender Strat was called Greta, and she did a good job. I mean, most guitars, Andy's guitars, didn't last very long because they got smashed to pieces on stage quite often. I mean, and it was quite a hard gig being a guitar in his hand sometimes.
I was so saddened, obviously, like everybody else, when I heard about Andy Gill's passing last year, and my sincere condolences on losing your longtime friend and bandmate. Did Andy know about the box set, or did he have any wishes about it as you were constructing it over the last handful of years?
Well, we all knew about it at the same time. So when 3.5 years ago we got this stuff, that's when we were aware that it might be possible to do this thing. But when I started working on the external box, there wasn't any great involvement then. And at the time that I had started reaching out, like I said, for both me and Hugo for contributions, Andy was already quite unwell. I mean, it was only in January and February of last year that really started getting in the stuff. I mean, we had a lot of material in our archives and lots of photographs, many of which, as you know, are previously unpublished. And so we sort of reached out and said, well, and I started thinking about how I could lay out the pages. And really sadly, I mean, Andy died in February of last year. So what I wanted to do then to respect his memory was to find, for example, in the work that we did with Rock Against Racism, to find what he said then about stuff, so that the objective of the book was that everybody we were a very tight crew. Everybody was equally respected, and I came to this format of the big picture on the right hand side. Then the other thing was my lyrics. Being a kind of lazy person, at the beginning I thought it'd be quite easy to put the lyrics on. I'll just go onto some online library, type in,
done the work for
you. Type into hell with poverty, and I'll just cut and paste it. But what I found was that many of these things were absolute nonsense. I mean, they were really wrong. I think they must have been obviously done by a machine or some machine learning type thing. And so then the thought came that every song needed to have its, for the first time ever, approved lyrics, so that they are the actual lyrics in there. And even Hugo, only a few weeks ago, had got lyrics wrong for 45 years. Even he didn't realise what the lyrics were until he'd read them. And so that was one thing. And then the second thing was to try to put some context of what it was like at the time. So an actual sort of historical fact or an historical event.
Yeah.
And then maybe a little kind of story with it. And for example, one of the songs on Entertainment is called Ether. And the final line of it, I had been asked many, many times about this. Now I think now people probably won't ask me because of the book, but the very last line is, there may be oil under Rock Hall. So people have asked me for years, they said, what is Rock Hall? Why is there oil under Rock Hall? What is it? And it was the last act of the British Empire in the 1950s. In the middle of the 1950s, there's a rock in the middle of the Atlantic, which is about the size of a suburban house. It's very small, covered in guano and birds. And the British Army landed 2 Marines onto this island, and under international law, if it's inhabited for a period of time, there's some kind of leisure demand that goes on there. And they stayed on this pointy rock in terrible circumstances for however long it was, to declare it to be British property. And it was the very last land grab by the British government, and it gave them the rights to the 200-mile continental shelf around this rock in the Atlantic. And it's been ever since challenged by Iceland, Ireland, and Greenland as it's not really British property, which it probably really isn't.
Right.
And but you will find, and this is what I feel I'm challenging Nostradamus, that only about 20 years ago they discovered there may be oil under Rock Hall. so I had thought, why do they do this thing? It must be some kind of land grab, and that's what that last lyric means. So I never have to explain it again. I'm explaining it now, but the book thoroughly explains this absurd thing. So that's the event that explains the last line.
Yeah, it's absurd and beautiful at the same time. I love this context. Let's take a little historical detour. I'm wondering if you look back at the late 70s when you were first getting your start, and especially after Entertainment came out and there was this massive underground of fans, did you recognize the band as being trailblazers of your period of time?
I think there was a point when we realized that we were doing something that was different. I mean, when we started off, this is the 77 bit of the 77 to 81.
Yeah.
We were quite a genre band, you know, and it's clear on the cassette tape that we were very influenced by Dr. Feelgood and the British sort of rough and ready pub rock type thing.
Yeah.
And it was then we, after a while, once you've been in a band, you ask a terrible question of yourself. You know, why am I in a band? Now there are lots of reasons to be in a band: to have fun, to go out and party the whole time, to make some money, etc. You know, Bob Geldof said it was get rich, get famous, and get laid was his reason for being in the Boomtown Rats.
Yeah.
And but what we wanted to do was do something that was original, and that's quite a difficult challenge to yourself. And I very much wanted to do things that was original and about the life as it really was, rather than this cliche, corny life that is constantly being regurgitated with a very limited set of subject matter. You know, I mean, like in a world like we have today, where you've got Max Martin writing 50% of all the chart hits, and they're all about nothing. I like them. I mean, I like them, but they're all about nothing. And half of all the songs are written by one writing team about nothing.
Yeah.
And yet we live in days where the conversations and the reasons we find things fulfilling or anxiety-inducing, like the great COVID pandemic. I think a song about the COVID pandemic would be deeply depressing, kind of, but that's what people are actually talking about. But if you looked at the music that's going on, you wouldn't think anything had changed.
Yeah.
You know, it's still that Swedish pop machine. So then thinking about being different, it's only really when you get going that you realise that. But people are saying, "No, that's not like I've never heard anything like that." And you think, "Oh, what's that right?" Because we weren't trying to write to be awkward or difficult. But I remember we were huge fans of funk.
Yeah.
And we like dancing. I mean, we used to go dance a lot, and like reggae music. So we used to go to blues dances and funk evenings, all that kind of stuff. But there's nothing worse than being a genre band, especially a white band playing a different discipline.
Right.
But we apply the aesthetic of funk to white rock, which is you go along, you drop out, something comes in, you have little recurrent refrains, and then you spin, and I used to like Washington Go-Go music. You know, I used to like it going on and on and on. And so if you apply the aesthetic of that to that, I think that's why actually bands like, you know, I'm just hugely fan, you know, Run the Jewels sampled our track, and because it's like full circle, because we've had full homage to American electric blues and funk, but without being a funk band, because that'd be, you know, bad manners.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's always what I love about Gang of Four. Like, you were, as the genre references, like post-punk, you were taking the punk elements, but then you were also taking your other influences and adding it on top of that. It was like that you were creating that new sound within the punk genre. I would love to hear an example of when you thought things were changing for you guys. Was it when you got signed to a label, or was there like a particular show or something where you're like, oh, heck yeah, like we're more than just a local band?
Well, I think actually it was that tour. The night after we played the American Indian Center in San Francisco, we were really excited to play there. Andy was always a great admirer of Sitting Bull, the great Lakota chief. Yeah. And he did a silk screen print of him when we were at school together. And he used to carry around the very unhappy story of the massacre at Wounded Knee, Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee. So he was really interested in Native American culture, and particularly the Plains peoples. And the American Indian Center there was a center of Native American radicalism, because they'd occupied Alcatraz only a few years before. So there was this sort of, and it was so exciting. And on the wall when we walked in, I remember there was a big poster on the back wall of Sitting Bull, and underneath it said landlord, and that was, it's like obviously the artwork which we produced was that thing of having an image which is really highly recognizable, but with a different narrative associated with it, like the cowboy and the Indian on the cover of Entertainment.
Yeah.
And so then the night after we played the Geary Temple in San Francisco. So there was this warm-up gig, massively packed show, which was fantastic. And the next night we were supporting the Buzzcocks, who are our really great friends, at the Geary Temple on Geary in San Francisco. And just 2 doors up from where the Jim Jones Temple was, where they went to take the Kool-Aid, you know, that little strip. And we played, and it was sensational. It was like we'd been playing up to that point. I don't know how many gigs we played. I think we'd been there about 3 weeks, but we were playing 2 shows a night. When we played on our own, we go on at like 10 or 11, go on again at 1 in the morning, every night, except when we supported the Buzzcocks. We had half a dozen shows with them. So we played, I don't know how many, but what the math is, but we'd probably do like 14 shows a week.
Wow.
So we got quite good at just playing. And then it all came together in San Francisco at the Geary Temple, which is why there's a big spread in the book about that thing, which was, and it got this sort of, it was, people couldn't get in, and the press just went berserk. We weren't signed in America then, remember? We were only signed in the rest of the world. We didn't have a label. We thought we were kind of going to be playing tiny clubs with a few people who might have heard Damaged Goods EP. But there was, like 2,000 people going nuts.
Amazing. Your song Damaged Goods that you just mentioned, it's perhaps your most popular. It's on your debut album, Entertainment, as well, from 1979. Why do you think it's withstood the test of time with people that have known you since then and just people that discover it even now,
Well, I think it's one of the songs which is about a relationship. So that I think people do like relationship things.
Absolutely.
And I didn't write an enormous number of songs about relationships, but then it also it plays with it all, and not plays with it. It tries to be serious about the relationship. So your kiss so sweet, so sour, and then Anthony would say, "I never saw your body." So, and there was a kind of, within it are these moments of, I think, sort of, I'm talking here only about the words, but this sort of anxiety. And then you had that call and response thing on the bass and the guitar, boom, boom, bang, boom, boom, bang, boom, boom, bang. And it was like one of those songs where we would always have little rules, and rules were, we're not going to have any key changes.
Yeah.
So, I mean, when we started off as a group, the songs were very much like verse, bridge, chorus, and you'd have like 3 or 4 chords in them, and we said, well, who needs chords?
Like the Ramones.
And the Ramones are geniuses. They do it better than ours. Right. I saw the Ramones many times.
Yeah.
And so that sort of thing, I think on Damaged Goods kicked off a warmth, because people say, "Oh yes, that's sort of kind of like my relationship," And then I think so, because it's a sort of troubled song, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It brings me joy every time I hear it. I've played it on the radio the last 20 years. Like I just adore it. Let's look back to you talked about this memory and this special time you had in San Francisco. What's another maybe memorable tour or a memorable show that you guys all played back then? I would love to hear a tour story or just a show story.
Well, actually, some of the gigs that were memorable for peculiar reasons. Like the very first time that we met the Buzzcocks, Dave Allen was responsible for booking dates. Andy and me were too lazy. We didn't do anything about that kind of thing. And but we did want to play shows, and it was very hard to get a gig. And we had been playing for about 2 years, and we'd never had a review. it was really good luck.
Yeah.
That when the band that started had turned into this other thing, but no one had noticed enough. You know, I think it's difficult if you emerge too early in your development to then turn into something else.
Right.
But so we got this point where we were sort of something else, and David phoned up a venue where the Buzzcocks were playing, and to see if we could be the support band.
Mm-hmm.
And the promoter said, no, you can't do this, you can't do that. And so we said, let's just go along anyway with our equipment and see if they'll let us play. So we'd already been told you can't play. So we turned up in our Ford Transit, piled in there and laid our equipment and said, you're on tonight. You know, the Buzzcocks were there. This is a time when the Sex Pistols and the thing were going around. There weren't many people likely to turn up to this thing because the Jam were playing in Leeds that night. We were in somewhere quite near Leeds. So the Buzzcocks were then not as much of a draw as the Jam. Wow. And so they said, you know, well, and we said, can we please play? You know, and they said, okay, all right. So we put our equipment up in front of theirs and played, and it was really thrilling, you know, to be with them, and they were great guys. And then the next day, we got a telegram from their manager, Richard Boone, and said, "Gang of Four, Buzzcocks want you for the European tour. Stop." It was a telegram, and the next day we were on the boat to Amsterdam or wherever it was. So it was, but it was very cheeky.
Yeah. I love that you weaseled your way into the fabric or into the, you know, world of.
We used to have to pay money to the bands to support them, so that it was you used to give them money. We then, at one point, we thought this is terrible. We're having to pay money to use the PA system. They charge you more money than we're being paid to use the PA. So we said, why don't we bring our own PA in? And Andrew Corrigan, who was our sound engineer and later the singer in the band the Mekons. I should have flat with Andrew Corrigan and Mark White, who became the singers of the Mekons. But Corrigan was our sound engineer, and he said, "Well, let's build a PA system ourselves that we could take in as well." So we bought these armor-plated drivers that had been on an aeroplane broadcasting to the troops in the Second World War. We carefully unscrewed all the armor plating off. And we always imagined them sort of saying, you know, Berlin has fallen, the Führer is dead, you know. And we then constructed like a reggae sound system, PA. It sounded amazing. And we made, unfortunately, like Spinal Tap, it was too big to get through the doors. We built it, and we hadn't even thought that it was too wide. So we had to cut it up and make it small enough to get through a door.
Do you still spend time with like Stephen Diggle of Buzzcocks, or do you guys talk about it now?
Not with the Buzzcocks. I mean, Pete was always a very nice character, but we didn't really socialise with them at all. And I think it's funny being in a band. You don't really socialise often with many other bands, except your own support bands or when you're playing with them. And even then, it's quite difficult because you have different trajectories.
Yeah.
But you know, when we were touring around '81, and we made great friends with the people from Athens, Georgia. So Pylon and R.E.M.
Oh yeah.
And that lot. And so both of those bands were our support bands for a long time. And so we got on really, really well, and we had a lot of adventures with that.
Yeah. What was the audience like at your shows in that 1977 to 81 era?
One thing that was interesting about our shows was even recently the same was there were a lot more women there. Mm-hmm. It sort of fitted into, I think, a sort of feeling that, as we certainly all felt, that feminism was a really important thing, and a lot of the songs are really like also Kurt had in Nirvana. You know, a lot of the songs are like that. In fact, of course, the Raincoats, who Kurt admired hugely, were one of our big support bands as well. And so that was something there. And I think the audience sort of knew that what they were liking was not mainstream, because it wasn't mainstream at all. And there's a great pleasure in that sometimes, knowing you're part of an elite.
For sure. You know, I'm thinking back to this era also, and I'm also thinking like about rivalries, how sometimes like maybe music journalists or bands were like pitted against each other, like maybe like Robert Smith and Morrissey, or Oasis and Blur or something. Did you guys have any rivals like that? Like any artists or bands that were pitted against you? Was it the Jam because they were playing on the, you know, getting all the shows in Leeds, or?
Well, I think a band that we had sometimes a friendly or unfriendly rivalry with was Squeeze. And wrote some fabulous songs, you know, Pulling Muscles from a Shell and that, sensational. But
not post.
And we were all signed to, not signed, we were all represented by Ian Copeland's FBI, Frontier Booking International Agency, which had all of the so-called then new wave acts.
Yeah.
And Squeeze were one of them. And when we did that same tour, the very first dates of the tour that we were talking about, Ian turned up with his really beat up Econoline vehicle, which had the rental back line in the back, and he said, and he gave us the keys. He didn't have a license plate on it. It was a really dodgy vehicle, and we set off in the rush hour from the airport to go through the Lincoln Tunnel to head off down to Philadelphia for our first ever show. And it broke down in the Lincoln Tunnel and rush hour. And after a delay of about 20 minutes, holding up all of the outbound traffic from the island, we then got out to the exit point. We were towed out and sat there for a while, and then it restarted, drove a little bit down the road, it broke down again. Eventually, the promoter had to send someone up to collect us because Squeeze had poured sugar into the gas tank as a naughty boy prank, and they were naughty boys. But I think the band I was most annoyed by were the Stranglers, because we used to bump into them, and I found their machismo really, particularly Jean-Jacques Bonnel's, particularly irritating, and not at all where I was at. And I mean, he and I once sort of squared up to each other because I'm a lifelong motorcyclist, and I had then a Triumph motorbike, and I was saying to him how the shame about my rubbishy bike was that it leaked oil all the time on my legs. Right. And he got angry that I was being sort of disloyal to Triumph motorcycles. And, you know, he's a kung fu expert, so yeah. I don't think I'd have succeeded. Yeah.
Thinking about then and now, over the last 40 years for you, since you've been able to have this career, a musical life, and do other things as well, but I'm wondering, what has been your favorite part of your job as a musician? And I'm curious, has that changed over the years?
I think the most enjoyable thing is when you've got something quite well worked out, but not finished, and then you're in a room, and then everyone starts buzzing off each other. You know, they start saying, if we just did a little bit of this, they sort of push the idea, and then they push the idea a bit further, and it's really can become really quite sort of thrilling, because you're trying to tease out all the meaning that you can from the song. I think sometimes when you've, or not very often, when you've recorded something and you find a year down the line, you think, oh, if only we had recorded the song as it was, like it is now, you know, because we've done things that make it more intense or more powerful. But it's playing with other people, and I think that from all my musician friends right now, the thing that people miss the most is being in a room with other people, and if you're in command of your voice or your instrument or whatever it is, you can start really working. Hopefully that will return as soon as possible when we've all been vaccinated by the summer, you know.
Yeah. Did you get a vaccine yet?
Yeah, I've been done, yeah.
Both of them? right?
I haven't had my second one yet. The UK is following an unusual policy in the world of a long delay between the first and the second jab. So I think in America it's like a 3 or 4 week gap. Here it's 3 months between the first and the second one.
Interesting.
But they've done a third of the entire population. So it's 23 million people of a population of only 60 million. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm wondering, what is your favorite Gang of Four reference in pop culture? Like, what's been your favorite use of your music, or you guys being name dropped in something over the years?
Well, there was a book. Well, one of the lyrics, one of the songs called "To Hell with Poverty."
Yeah.
And I think, I can't remember the name of the book. There was a big selling novel which talked about how people had placards with "To Hell with Poverty," and it was clearly a quotation from the record. But the line that's most quoted is I wrote this line called "This heaven gives me migraine," and that seems to resonate a lot, because I think this heaven does give us all a bit of a migraine. You always feel rather ungrateful one always feels ungrateful for not embracing the heaven with both hands and whinging about it, but it's sometimes a bit much.
Yeah. I think that that's so great, and I love your music in the Manchurian Candidate. I thought that was great. Yeah, you've had so many. The band has been celebrated in so many different ways. You were talking about that line and everything. I'm thinking about Gang of Four and your ideals, and your songwriting has always been pretty synonymous. Like, there's love songs and such, or anti-love songs, but you've been pretty synonymous with politics and such, especially during those years where there was so much poverty and struggle and unemployment in the UK when you guys were starting. Are you still using your platform nowadays to talk about politics?
Well, I think everyone has their turn to express their voice. I mean, I feel great solidarity with, I'd say, the Black Lives Matter movement in America. I think that is a real analog to what we were heavily involved in, which was rock against racism in our day. And we spent a lot of time, and again, there's photographs in the book, on the back of trucks on demonstrations, about things that were really important to us, because we had many friends from Afro-Caribbean backgrounds they were just our friends. So it wasn't a kind of an artificial thing, and certainly it wasn't. And I think there are all sorts of things that make us all want to be better. I think, one of the songs which was my favourite live was "He'd Send in the Army." I think that was my all-time favourite song to perform live. And the lyrics were, the family's head gives orders, in the end what he says goes. And its own logic is that you've got someone very tyrannical in their personal life, and they then embrace a whole set of really repressive ideas elsewhere. And of course, you can then, in an enjoyable way, because they're not meant to be lectures, and they're not meant to be political platforms, in the sense of saying, if only we spent more money on this than that, because that would be really boring. But some of it, I mean, I mentioned that I'd lazily gone out to the web to try and find out what the lyrics actually were that I couldn't remember. And what I found interesting was how unlike songs they are. I mean, in the sense they don't have verses or bridges or choruses, and a lot of them don't rhyme at all.
Right.
They're not the same. They're not syllabically equivalent. And one of the songs, which is called "Cheeseburger," which is on Solid Gold, and Andy and I had been playing pool in Barney's Beanery in Hollywood, up from the old Tropicana Hotel, the notorious Tropicana Hotel.
Okay, yeah.
And we were playing with a couple of truckers and they'd been really drinking far too much to play pool with us, because we were in a band, and people in bands get quite good at pool because they've got nothing else to do.
Right.
And so they were paying to get on the table, and you know, they were sort of talking about their life, and it was really funny. I mean, we ran the table all night, but the lines of that song are some of the things that I could remember the next day. It was like, I moved from one place to the next. I hope they keep down the price of gas. Or I shoot the best. And are you talking dollars? And this other guy used to sing, high numbers, low numbers, 8-bar break. And so it was a bit of a collage, really, of a sort of a conversation.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's an answer, but it's a thing.
Yeah, it is. You know, I'm wondering, so there's this huge fascination right now, probably because of the television show The Crown on Netflix. There's a huge fascination here in the States, and obviously always with the UK and the royal family and everything. Have you been fascinated even more with the royal family because of the show The Crown, or even this new Oprah interview or Harry and Meghan moving to the States?
Well, I think I love The Crown's. It just looks fantastic. The acting is sensational. It's beautiful. It's also not, strictly speaking, accurate or true. Many things in there. But actually, I was about to say I'm a Republican, but I mean that in the sense of I'm anti-monarchical. I don't think the Crown. I don't think it's the royal family is full of rogues and bad characters. With the Queen accepted, she's the only respectable member of the royal family, I think, of the old royal family, as opposed to William and Kate.
Yeah.
She's very uptight. And then you've got rogues like Prince Andrew, the friend of that terrible paedophile in America. You know, Princess Margaret was a off the chart crazy person, and the depiction of her in The Crown is really dialed back from what she was like. She was really rude. She was really, really rude. I mean, there's a book called Yes, Mum. I think it's called something like 600 Encounters with Princess Margaret. She was famously rude. I mean, really, really rude. And she used to tip ash into people's ashtrays when she smoked all through meals. She'd tip her cigarettes into your food. That kind of thing.
Oh, that's
but I think we should abolish the monarchy, and I certainly think that when the Queen dies, Prince Charles is not going to be a very popular king.
No.
Because of his treatment of Diana, which was shameful. I mean, I speak as a Republican. I mean a anti-monarchical person. We should have a republic like the United States.
Yeah.
And the terrible watching footage of their wedding, when the night before he'd been with Camilla. It's not nice.
No.
It's not nice. So I think the sooner they're gone, the better. Really.
Yeah, I wonder if that'll happen in our lifetimes, yours or mine.
Well, what we're seeing now is what they're like. I mean, we're seeing how dysfunctional they are. I mean, they really aren't a model for good behaviour. I mean, I mentioned earlier on that I spent a lot of time in Denmark over the last few years, and their royal family, they have a modest allowance, but all of their palaces are owned by the state. They cycle into the office. They do a few ceremonial things, and it's pretty good. And that's what most monarchies are like. They're there really just to meet ambassadors and the like. That's really what we should have if we have it at all. But it's different in Britain. They're immensely enmeshed in the class structure, which is very powerful in Britain.
Yeah. I have just a couple more questions, and thanks again for all your time. It's been a joy to speak with you. I wanted to ask about your friend and co-founder of Gang of Four, Andy Gill. He passed away at age 64, February 1st of last year. And coming up in May, there's going to be a tribute album coming out titled The Problem of Leisure, a celebration of Andy Gill and Gang of Four. There's covers on there from like the Dandy Warhols and Warpaint and Tom Morello. Anything you want to say about the tribute record, or have you heard it? Are you on it?
I don't know anything at all about it. I haven't heard it.
Uh-huh.
I wasn't part of it at all. I hope they do well. But I mean, anyone can cover a song, and I hope the money's going to a good cause. I mean, I don't know any. I haven't heard it. All that I know about it is there's a cover of a cuddly toy on the album by Ben Hurst, but that's so I can't comment. I don't know anything about it.
Yeah, no, that's okay. I was just wondering also, like, can you share something about your friendship with Andy, with me and those that have that are watching this, because your fans adore you guys, and those in those particular 77 to 81 years. But yeah, something about your guys' friendship.
We were friends at school. I mean, I think in America, high school, but from the age of like 15, 16, we were friends. In fact, Andy knew my wife when he was 11. He used to go around to her house to play chess. So my wife was only much longer than I have, and we were great friends at school. He was in the year below me at school, and when we were there, we had, we used to drive around in our really terrible motorcycles. We had really small motorcycles. Andy had the worst of them all. He had something called a moped. I don't think it exists in America, where you have to sort of pedal to keep them going, like a 50cc thing. You see them on old French movies. He had one of those, and it was really terrible. And so I drove around. I had a Honda 50, which was really quite classy. This is at the age of 16, and he had a moped that was so feeble that the light bulb on the front wouldn't work, and so he sellotaped a torch onto the front of the motorcycle to see. And so we were driving around one night. I'm just telling the typical kind of story that teenagers do. And we were stopped by the cops, and they said, "What are you doing? You're driving this thing with a torch sellotaped on the front." And the policeman was laughing, so it's really funny. Gave him a ticket. Said, "You better go home." So we sort of drove off, and we were cackling with laughter because Andy had also hand painted. There's a thing in the UK like a tax disc. You have to pay an amount of money every year just to have a car and a vehicle on the road. And he hadn't got bought. He hand painted it like a sort of a miniature Renaissance picture. This tiny little thing, all of the text, And we would think, "Oh, we've got away with this crime." And about 5 minutes later, we were stopped by the same policeman, and he looked at this hand painted tax disc that Andy had on his bike, and he was laughing so much he could hardly keep a straight face. He said, "Well, he just said, F off. I just don't want to see you again." And because he was laughing so much he couldn't write us a ticket. But so we had these adventures, and then I went up to Leeds to study art. And we were at school in a department, me and Andy, and Kevin Lysett and Tom Greenhalgh and Mark White, who formed the Mekons. This is the school at the age of 17. Paul Greengrass, the movie director, and Adam Curtis. So that was the group of us at school.
Amazing. And
so then we went to Leeds. So Andy and I we had flats next to each other, and we used to start all this nonsense off. We used to write songs together. Which he had an acoustic guitar, and I had a terrible old cassette player, and so we used to sing into this cassette player. And then he and I, our social lives and study lives were sort of interwoven.
Yeah.
And I'd got a grant to go to New York to write about Jasper Johns, the pop artist.
Oh wow!
And Andy said, "Oh, can I come with you as well?" And I said, "Sure." And he got a grant to do a photographic study of Gothic architecture in northern France, which was so paid for the ticket to go to New York. So, and then we stayed in New York with a woman called Mary Harron, whose father was a very famous Canadian comedian. Okay. She later was the director of American Psycho and the notorious Betty Page. And then she was a journalist on New York Punk magazine, and she had a studio flat on St. Mark's Place. So we crashed with her, and we went to CBGB's every night. so we hung out with Television and Talking Heads and the Ramones and Patti Smith Group and the Voidoids when they were all just sitting in that horrible, smelly club, entertaining each other. So that was in 1976. So we came back. We said, we're going to start a band because we'd hung out, spent a lot of time with people like the Voidoids and the Dead Boys and all those New York punk bands.
That's so cool. And also, just listening to you tell the story, it sounds like Andy really looked up to you, and really was like, I want to, like he really was attracted to wanting to have a friendship with you and to make music.
Yeah, I think we were immense buddies, and something that was very cathartic in putting the book together was the photographs. I mean, there's hardly a photograph of the four of us in which one or other of us isn't smiling. We amused each other heavily. We argued a lot, but we were a crew.
Yeah.
And I found that very cathartic because you often forget what fun you had. I mean, and a lot of our fun was in the States, because obviously that was where we spent a lot of time.
Yeah. Oh, how lovely. As we close up, what song do you want Gang of Four to be remembered by?
I don't know. I think I don't know. I actually really like To Hell with Poverty.
Yeah.
I think that's got a great riff. It's got Dave and Hugo's incredibly propulsive rhythm section, and I quite like my lyrics as well. It's quite a piece. I mean, I think that intro riff was always thrilling. It's thrilling when they're recording. It's thrilling live. And then Hugo and Dave were just absolutely, metronomically funking it. And then this stuff going on, and it had. Yeah, I think that's pretty good one.
Yeah. Well, the Gang of Four box set, it's out now on Matador Records, and among the new bits included in it, there's a demo for the unreleased song Elevator, which was such a welcome surprise. I love that track. And Jon, I just want to say I appreciate you taking the time to let me honor the legacy of your band, to hear stories. I just truly enjoyed this.
Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Really good. Thank
you. My name's Alicia. That's Jon King. And this has been another session at home on Indie 102.3.